This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us for this Tuesday, December 11th. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, President Donald Trump looks for someone to fill a very important position. He's chief of staff at the White House. We're going to take a look at who he might choose. And as the UN holds an international summit on climate change, how seriously should we be taking the warnings about the threat of global warming? We're going to hear from a top economist who took a look at similar warnings in the past. Plus, a homeless man finds $17,000. But the question is, what does he do with it? All those stories and much more ahead in this first half hour of CBN Newswatch. We want to begin, though, with President Trump's search for a new chief of staff after the president's top choice to replace John Kelly says he doesn't want the job. Nick Ayers, Vice President Pence's chief of staff, has respectfully declined the president's offer. So who is the president's second choice? Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, may likely influence the decision.
The president will make the right choice for chief of staff when he's ready, and hopefully he'll choose somebody he's got great chemistry with, great relationship with, who will help him navigate the next couple of years.
And our correspondent Gary Lane is here now. He's following this developing story for us. So why would Gary Kushner have an influence on who the president chooses?
Many of the president's critics say that the Trump family has a lot of influence, especially Ivanka and Jared Kushner. That they have a lot of influence on the president and that they will weigh in. They want somebody that they get along with as well, that will give them access to their father and father-in-law. And John Kelly has limited their access. They don't like that. So they want someone they can get along with. And many of Trump's critics say, look, he runs the White House like he runs a family business.
We've named some, but who is in the running?
Well, some of those that are in the running, we have named some. I would say, look, Secretary of the Treasury Mnuchin, also Director of OMB, Mick Mulvaney, also some that have been mentioned, Dave Bossie, who was the former deputy campaign chairperson, Lighthizer, who is the trade representative for the United States. So those are some that have been mentioned. We don't know for certain, but also Mark Meadows. And I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Tell us why he would be a good choice, some people think.
Well, Mark Meadows was a founding member of the Freedom Caucus on Capitol Hill. He's been pro-Trump all the way, and he is also a successful businessman, a real estate developer and construction worker or director.
All right, we'll continue to watch this story throughout the day.
Right.
Thank
you.
you.
See who he chooses.
And ahead today on CBN's Faith Nation, we're going to interview Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch about Robert Mueller's Russia investigation and the talk in Washington of impeaching President Donald Trump. That is on Faith Nation. It begins at 6 p.m. Eastern right here on CBN. We're going to have that on the news channel for you. Israeli police and army are still searching for a Palestinian gunman who shot 7 Israelis in a drive-by shooting near the town of Afar Monday. The gunman seriously injured a pregnant woman and her baby. Both are in critical condition after the baby was delivered as a result of the attack. The father of the woman is Chaim Silberstein, the founder of Keep Jerusalem. CBN's Scott Ross interviewed Silberstein about the future of Jerusalem.
Do you see a good future ahead or no?
Zechariah chapter 14 talks about what's happening here on the Mount of Olives. There'll be an earthquake here. There'll be a war. There'll be all kinds of unnatural things that are happening here.
That's yet to happen.
That's yet to happen in the future. But Zechariah ends the prophecy by saying, and Jerusalem will dwell secure. The question is how we will get there. The thing that is guaranteed to bring peace to Jerusalem is keeping Jerusalem united under Israeli sovereignty. And that certainly is the prelude to hopefully the incredible event that we hope and pray will happen later, which will be ultimate peace both to Jerusalem and the world.
Silberstein and his wife are keeping a vigil for their daughter and grandchild and asking for prayers for their recovery. The Supreme Court will not hear a case involving states' efforts to end funding of Planned Parenthood through Medicaid programs. Justices Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Clarence Thomas voted to hear the case. Newly seated Justice Brett Kavanaugh, however, sided with Justices John Roberts, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan to not hear it. 4 justices are required to agree before a case can be granted a hearing. In his dissent, Thomas criticized the court for its, quote, particularly troubling decision, arguing the case itself really had nothing to do with abortion. Investors are looking for a turnaround on Wall Street today after a huge comeback Monday when stocks came back after the Dow was down more than 500 points in the morning to close up for the day. The market has been falling in the last couple of months over concerns about the Fed raising interest rates and a possible trade war with China. Top economists tell CBN News they've proposed a solution for trade battles. And as Ben Kennedy reports, they've been hoping the president will consider that solution.
President Trump said the U.S. lost billions of dollars due to unfair trade last year. But analysts, including one of his former economic advisors, say this idea would solve the trade turmoil without further tariffs.
I don't know if he's going to do it. I know that article landed on his desk, and I know he's considering it.
Economist Stephen Moore's proposal aims to create a level playing field.
You offer these countries, we'll go to zero tariff if you will.
The zero-for-zero offer would drop all tariffs, barriers, and subsidies between the U.S. and its allies. What kind of impact will this have on the average American? Will the goods go down, the prices?
Yeah, of course they will, because tariff is a tax, and so if we can get the tariffs down to zero, that means not only will goods and services cost less here when we go to Walmart or we go to Best Buy or wherever it might be, and that's a good thing for American consumers, but it also means think about the jobs this would create.
But not every country is willing to talk free and fair trade.
China's market distortions and the way they deal cannot be tolerated.
Moore's recommendation comes during an ongoing back and forth between the U.S. and China on trade. Trump first slapped tariffs of $250 billion of Chinese imports. Beijing responded with penalties on $60 billion of U.S. products.
You want to talk about countries that don't play by the rules. China cheats, they steal, they're building up their military, they make it almost impossible for American businesses to do business over there in China.
So China will be no doubt the biggest challenge.
No doubt, there's no doubt about that.
The Council of Economic Advisors reports the average American tariff is 3.5%. Average EU rate is 5%, while China's rate is double at 10%. Moore says by offering zero tariffs, it allows America to take the high ground and even gain a stronger negotiating position with China to end some of Beijing's most abusive trade policies. Now, Steve, all this sounds great. Zero for zero, more jobs, the economy would improve. Why isn't it so easy for countries just to get on board?
Because these other countries don't want to do it. I mean, so these countries like to lecture us and stuff, but when it comes right down to it, a lot of these countries have protectionist impulses, and they don't want to open up their markets to us.
Moore tells me Great Britain would be the best country to offer this zero-for-zero deal, but they first need to exit the European Union. In July, Trump and EU President Jean-Claude Juncker agreed the U.S. and EU would work towards zero tariffs, zero non-tariff barriers, and even zero subsidies on non-auto industrial goods. Now the challenge will be extending that to all products. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, the White House.
French President Emmanuel Macron broke his silence and even took responsibility for the anger of citizens protesting the out-of-control taxation. He spoke on national television saying he might have hurt people with his words. However, yellow-vested demonstrators vowed to keep up the pressure on a man they see as arrogant, out of touch, and president of the rich. Speaking with a soft voice and gentle tone, Macron pleaded for a return to calm after almost 4 weeks of protest that started in neglected provinces to oppose fuel tax increases and progress to rioting in Paris. Coming up, the fuel tax in France was supposed to help fight global warming, but that clearly did not work out. And some experts say fears about climate change are overstated. We're going to hear again from one of the president's economic advisors, Stephen Moore, about how similar warnings in the past didn't come to pass.
God Almighty is a God of blessing. He always wants to bless his people. But how do you get that blessing? And what principles will unlock that secret?
In Miraculous Blessings, Pat Robertson shows you how to open the floodgates of God's awesome blessings in your life.
In order to have a blessing, you've got to be blessable.
Discover what the Bible has to say about God's covenant of blessing, the laws of blessing, and what are the hindrances to the blessings of God.
The words of Jesus, they are as valid as the law of gravity, and if we follow those laws, we will be blessed.
You'll see amazing true stories of everyday people whose lives were rescued and transformed by God's miraculous blessings.
But even the doctors acknowledged that this had to be a miracle.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com to become a CBN partner and get miraculous blessings today.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
When I came to Regent University, it's like the world opened up. I felt like I needed to advance my career and go back to school. Regent was a perfect fit for me. The Regent professors are world class. You are equipped. The focus of the faculty is on each individual student, whether it's online or in person. You become a part of Regent's family. You carry with you not just the content and the knowledge, but the confidence to understand that we can be significant in the world.
Regent University. Follow your path.
The UN Secretary General opened the UN's climate summit in Poland last week with a dramatic appeal to world leaders to take the threat of global warming seriously. It comes after a recent U.S. government report on the dangers of global warming. But an economic advisor to President Trump's campaign questions these warnings. Steve Moore is the co-author of Trumponomics, a new book about the president's economic plan. And he spoke with CBN's financial editor, Drew Parkhill. Here's a look at that interview.
You've also paid attention to these warnings about climate change, which have come for many years, along with other warnings. What was your take on the government's report that came out recently?
Well, there's a doom and gloom lobby in America today and around the world, and I estimate that the climate change industrial complex, and that's what we have today, is tens and tens of billions of dollars to spread this doom and gloom. We've created whole industries of climate scientists to come up with these models that predict the world is coming to an end. Now, the problem with this is that all of the predictions that these same doom and gloom people have made over the years have been wrong. I mean, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, remember the population bomb of the 1960s, that we were, going to be standing elbow to elbow with each other. And then there was the limits to growth. Right. And then there was, we're going to run out of food and everybody's going to starve to death. And then, of course, there was the, do you remember the second ice age is coming? That's what they used to say. Now they say it's warming, but then they said it was cooling.
In the late 70s.
Yes, and of course, and then there was the peak oil, that we're going to run out of oil. Now, does anybody today believe we have peak oil? So, look, that doesn't mean that they're wrong. Here's my point as an economist, because I'm not a climatologist, I'm an economist. They say if we don't take this action, that the world economy, 100 years ago was 10% smaller. If you destroy our energy capacity, and that's what this is all about, when the UN and these climate reports say we have to take action, what they're saying is don't use energy, don't use oil, don't use gas, don't use coal, don't use nuclear energy. Well, that will completely collapse our economy.
Right. Okay, now, why are these predictions wrong? Is it because people just come up with better ideas that the doomsayers don't see coming?
Well, this is the other point, is every action that they see needs to be taken is an action by government. It's actually a big, huge government power grab here. They're going to tell you what kind of toilet you have, what kind of light bulbs you use, what kind of energy you use, how much energy you can use, what you set your thermostat at. This is an incredibly invasive idea that takes away people's personal liberty. My feeling is, look, let's assume that there are problems with the future of the climate. By the way, the climate's been changing for hundreds of thousands of years. This isn't going to be combated by government action. I mean, does anybody really think the United Nations can change the world temperature? It will be combated by Americans who are ingenious, who will come up with new technologies, new innovations to deal with this crisis. It's not going to come from government.
Now, President Trump, you were an advisor on, and you still work with him in the White House, but during his campaign, you were one of the economic advisors. President Trump has taken a lot of heat for pulling out of this Paris Accord on climate change. Was that the right move?
This was the worst treaty ever. I mean, it was totally anti-America. It was basically saying, we're going to have to pay hundreds of billions of dollars to the rest of the world. Why? Why would we? And second of all, I mean, it's going to basically shut down American energy. We pay all the costs. And thirdly, none of these other countries are taking it seriously. Already this Paris Climate Accord has been in action for a year. None of the other countries are coming anywhere close to meeting their targets. Not China, not India, not Europe, not Australia, none of these countries. So the one country, by the way, that's reduced its carbon emissions the most is the United States of America. We're not even in the treaty. Right. Isn't that ironic?
Yeah, it's just amazing. Folks, Steve Moore is co-author of the book Trumponomics. He talks about things you won't hear from the major media, what President Trump was really like, as well as a lot of other subjects. It's a very good read. Steve, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Still to come, it's a serious brain injury usually associated with football, but it affects people off the football field as well, and it can be so severe it can drive people to severe violence or depression. We're going to tell you about that when we come back. Stay with us.
God Almighty is a God of blessing. He always wants to bless his people. But how do you get that blessing? And what principles will unlock that secret?
In Miraculous Blessings, Pat Robertson shows you how to open the floodgates of God's awesome blessings in your life.
In order to have a blessing, you've got to be blessable.
Discover what the Bible has to say about God's covenant of blessing, the laws of blessing, and what are the hindrances to the blessings of God.
The words of Jesus, they are as valid as the law of gravity, and if we follow those laws, we will be blessed.
You'll see amazing true stories of everyday people whose lives were rescued and transformed by God's miraculous blessings.
But even the doctors acknowledge that this had to be a miracle.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com to become a CBN partner and get miraculous blessings today.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
CTE, it's a brain injury associated with repeated hits to the head. Its victims can become violent to the point of murder and so depressed they take their own lives. Most people associate this condition with football, but as CBN Health reporter Lori Johnson shows us, it goes far beyond the gridiron.
Many people couldn't understand why a Super Bowl standout with a $40 million contract would murder someone, then commit suicide at age 27. But when scientists autopsied the brain of Aaron Hernandez and discovered an extremely severe case of CTE, his erratic behavior made more sense.
There is no safe blow to the human head.
Dr. Bennett Amalu was one of the first doctors to raise awareness about chronic traumatic encephalopathy, better known as CTE. He says hits to the head damage the area of the brain responsible for decision-making and judgment.
It could present with changes in personality, mood disorders, becoming a drug addict, an alcoholic. You have a much higher risk of engaging in self-harm, attempting suicides, and even committing suicides.
Dr. Amalu's medical contributions led to the groundbreaking movie Concussion, starring Will Smith.
Tell the truth.
While Amalu says the film's content was accurate, the title was misleading.
Concussions do not cause CTE. What causes CTE is blows to your head with or without symptoms. With or without a helmet. Helmets do not protect your brain from CTE.
Dr. Amalu says in just one season of practices and games, players can suffer hundreds of violent blows to the head.
Studies have shown that if your child plays football, that just after one season, there's a reasonable probability that your child had suffered irreversible brain damage. So over the years, it accumulates.
Boston University's CTE Center houses hundreds of brains of deceased football players and others from all walks of life.
20% of our cases, the donors have never had a witness, diagnosed, or reported concussion in their lives, yet have CTE at the end of the day.
Dr. Lee Goldstein and his colleagues found CTE in nearly all former football players they studied. What's possibly more disturbing is they also found the condition in brains of military veterans exposed to explosions, but who had not suffered a concussion.
We were very surprised by this and very confused.
So they went back to the lab.
This is the shock tube. It perfectly simulates in mice what IED blasts do to soldiers. All of the animals tested developed CTE. But what's interesting is none of them had concussions. In fact, they seemed perfectly fine afterward.
We were able to figure out what happens in blast, and that is the head is moving very, very quickly, and it's that head motion, we call it the bobblehead effect, that causes the damage that leads to CTE.
That raises the possibility that battle-worn soldiers may have CTE rather than the often diagnosed post-traumatic stress.
Very common that these folks come back. They are not the same, and in some very real sense, they are not the same person they were before. In fact, the front part of the brain may be damaged, and in that respect, they really are different people.
According to Dr. Goldstein, there are likely many other types of people beyond vets and athletes suffering from this brain trauma.
Homeless populations, people who are chronically mentally ill, people who are at risk for domestic abuse, intimate partner abuse, child abuse, elder abuse, incarcerated populations, populations at risk for violence, people in poverty.
CTE can only be confirmed after death. And while there is not yet a cure, scientists are developing a test to diagnose it in the living, which could lead to a treatment. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
You can learn more about CTE and Dr. Amalu's faith journey as he revealed his discoveries to a public that actually didn't want to hear them. Be sure to tune in to Healthy Living. That's hosted by Lori Johnson beginning tonight at 9:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel. You can watch Lori's full interview with Dr. Amalu there. Coming up, a homeless man finds a brown paper bag with $17,000 in it, but he doesn't keep it for himself. We're going to tell you what he did with it when we come back. Stay with us for this very touching story.
God Almighty is a God of blessing. He always wants to bless his people. But how do you get that blessing? And what principles will unlock that secret?
In Miraculous Blessings, Pat Robertson shows you how to open the floodgates of God's awesome blessings in your life.
In order to have a blessing, you've got to be blessable.
Discover what the Bible has to say about God's covenant of blessing, the laws of blessing, and what are the hindrances to the blessings of God.
The words of Jesus, they are as valid as the law of gravity, and if we follow those laws, we will be blessed.
You'll see amazing true stories of everyday people whose lives were rescued and transformed by God's miraculous blessings.
But even the doctors acknowledged that this had to be a miracle.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com to become a CBN partner and get miraculous blessings today.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Bring home a miracle this holiday season with Superbook's newest episode, Jesus Feeds the Hungry.
I have never seen a miracle this great.
Superbook Jesus Feeds the Hungry. Yours when you join the Superbook Club. And if you act by December 31st, you'll receive 3 copies of The First Christmas is Our Way of Saying Thanks. Plus, call now to receive 3 copies of the all-new Superbook Fun-Filled Activity Book. Jesus Feeds the Hungry. Available now.
Come home to the Southern Gospel Station from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites. CBN Southern Gospel. Available now at cbnradio.com.
A homeless man goes looking for something to eat in a bread box outside a Seattle area food bank before it opens, and he finds $17,000. When the food bank director, Anita Miller, arrives, Booth gives her the bag full of money. She doesn't realize what it is at first, but then calls police to report the find. Well, after that money wasn't claimed over 90 days, police returned the money to the food bank. Booth was given the police chief's Citizen Award for his good deed, and the food bank gave him several gift cards to help him with some of his basic needs. Right now, it's time for your Tuesday Tweetable. It's a message I hope will inspire you, and I also hope that you'll possibly post, tag, tweet, and share this with other people you may know. God is not looking for you to be perfect. He's looking for you to be available. In fact, he uses ordinary, flawed people to do extraordinary things. You don't need to look any further than the pages of Scripture to find real-life examples of that. So you don't have to be perfect, just be available. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. We thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can always find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. And we'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, on Twitter, as well as Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make this a terrific Tuesday and a wonderful rest of the week. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow, everybody. Goodbye and God bless.